All right, we are about to dive into one of the most unbelievable declassified documents in American history. Seriously, this is a story that sounds like it was ripped straight out of a spy thriller, but you're going to see that every single detail is shockingly real. So let's just start with a question that well, it sounds completely insane. Could the United States military ever draft a plan to attack its own cities and its own people, all just to gin up an excuse for a war? I know, it sounds like the plot of some wild conspiracy theory, but stick with me because the evidence tells a very different story. So, picture this. It's the early 1960s. We're at the absolute peak of the Cold War, and a top-secret proposal is being drawn up. It has one single chilling objective: create a solid justification for invading Cuba. And the ways they plan to do it? Well, they were nothing short of horrifying. I mean, the sheer scale of what they were proposing is just staggering. The plan actually included staging fake terrorist attacks in major American cities. We're talking Washington, D.C. and Miami. It suggested sinking a boat filled with Cuban refugees on the high seas. It even detailed this incredibly elaborate plot to swap a real civilian airliner with a drone and then shoot the drone down and blame the whole thing on Cuba. And this is the part that you really have to let sink in. This wasn't some fantasy. It wasn't some fringe idea from a couple of rogue agents. This was a formal proposal, created and fully approved by the most senior military leadership in the entire United States. And that formal proposal? It had a name: Operation Northwoods. For almost 40 years, it was buried under a top-secret classification. Basically, a ghost in the government's archives. So now, let's look at the actual proof. Okay, so what you're looking at right here is the actual declassified cover memo. See the date? March 13, 1962. And look at the letterhead, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. See that top secret stamp? This isn't speculation, folks. This is the undeniable black and white proof. So who on earth would come up with something this extreme? This wasn't the work of some lone wolf general. No way. This plan was formally signed by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Lyman Lemnitzer, and every single member of the Joint Chiefs. And then they presented it directly to the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, and the Kennedy administration. This quote, this is taken directly from the Northwoods document, and it just reveals the cold, calculating mindset that was behind this whole thing. The idea to blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay, they saw that as a way to create another remember the Maine incident. The American deaths that would result, they weren't seen as a tragedy. No, they were seen as a tool to create, and I quote, a helpful wave of national indignation. Just, wow. So this all just begs the question, right? Why? Why would the highest levels of the U.S. military even consider such a treacherous, dangerous plan? To get that, we really have to go back and feel the intense pressure of the early 1960s. You know, the early 60s were an absolute pressure cooker. Just a year earlier, in 61, you had the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion, which was a huge embarrassment for the U.S. military. By early 62, this massive covert program called Operation Mongoose was already trying to destabilize Cuba. So it was in this climate of total frustration and anti-communist paranoia that Operation Northwoods was proposed in March, and this was just months before the Cuban Missile Crisis would push the entire world to the very brink of nuclear war. According to historians, that Bay of Pigs fiasco just broke the dike. The top military leaders, they saw President Kennedy's refusal to commit U.S. forces as a sign of weakness. They were convinced that all this covert action wasn't getting the job done, and that a full-scale invasion was the only way to get rid of Fidel Castro. They just needed a reason that the American public would actually get behind. So the plan is on the table, it's been signed by the military's most senior officers, and it's been presented to the White House. What happens next is, you could argue, the most important part of this entire story. The plan was never, ever executed. President Kennedy and his Secretary of Defense, McNamara, they took one look at Operation Northwoods and rejected it. Completely. They absolutely refused to authorize these fabricated attacks on American soil. And this really gets to the core conflict, doesn't it? On one side, you have the Joint Chiefs, totally convinced that military force is the only answer, and they're willing to literally manufacture a reason to use it. And on the other side, you have the Kennedy administration, insisting on civilian control over the military and flat out refusing to be manipulated into starting a war. Now, rejecting Operation Northwoods had some serious consequences. It created this massive rift between the White House and the Pentagon. McNamara reportedly lost all faith in General Lemnitzer, treating him, as one aide put it, like a schoolboy. And it wasn't long after that Lemnitzer was denied a second term as chairman and was basically shuffled off to a command in Europe. Okay, so if the plan never happened, why is it so important? I mean, why does a rejected proposal from over 60 years ago still matter today? Well, its true impact, its legacy, wouldn't really be felt for decades. 40 years. That's how long this document, and the absolutely unbelievable plan it contained, was kept hidden from the American public. It wasn't until the late 1990s, as part of a review of the JFK assassination records, that this thing finally saw the light of day. So, what Operation Northwoods proposed is a textbook example of what's known as a false flag operation. It's an attack that you commit yourself, but you make it look like your enemy did it. It gives you the perfect excuse to retaliate. You know, the release of this document, it did permanent damage to the trust between the American people and their government. For the very first time, there was official, undeniable proof that the highest levels of the military had been willing to commit acts of terrorism against their own citizens. It gave a real historical basis for skepticism, and it became the ultimate what if in all kinds of debates about how wars really get started. And that's really the crucial point here. The true legacy of Operation Northwoods isn't that it happened. It's that it was ever even conceived of and then approved by the military's top brass. The fact that the entire Joint Chiefs of Staff signed off on it, it reveals a really dangerous mindset in the corridors of power, a belief that the ends justified pretty much any means. Which kind of leaves us with one final big question. Knowing that a plan like this was once seriously considered by the people in charge, how does that change the way we view official stories today? It's a powerful reminder that transparency and accountability, well, they aren't just nice ideas, they are absolute necessities. Thanks for joining this explainer.